up, Ann Watson. Go can save you more than ever during our biggest Hoover sale of the year. Every Hoover vacuum cleaner is on sale now. Save $60 on the Hoover convertible upright, $110 on the Concept One, $140 on the Hoover Celebrity Powermatic, and save on all Hoover bags, up to 33% off the regular Wilco prices. Spectacular savings on every Hoover vacuum in stock during the Wilco annual Hoover sale. Don't miss it.
BCTV, we're giving it all we got.
Good morning. As everybody in the province of British Columbia knows, Premier Bill Bennett offered a little bit of an olive branch to the Labour movement and to the Solidarity protesters last week. It was only yesterday that the Strike Strategy Committee of the BC Federation of Labour came out with its hard-nosed response. The hard-nosed response being that unless there was some really significant back down by Bennett on the firing of the 1,600 BCGEU members, and a guarantee that all 240,000 public sector employees be given the exemption under Bill 3 on layoff, termination and recall, there will be, that's what they said last night, a general strike in British Columbia on November the 1st. And furthermore, as Kramer said of the BC Federation of Labour last night, if the government uses the essential services, then the private sector unions will go out. It seems that all is not quite as solid within the Labour movement as was indicated by Mike Kramer. Kramer was scheduled to be on my program this morning at 9 a.m. so I could question him, for the public's benefit, in detail on how solid these strike plans are. But at the last moment, Mr. Kramer can't make it. My understanding is that he has been called to a meeting with the IWA at the curiously coincidental time of 9 a.m. today. So we better hold our horses a little bit to see if the plans as announced so bluntly by Kramer last night stand up in the light of day, with the private sector unions also making their spiel on what's likely to happen on November the 1st. Make no bones about it, there is a possibility of industrial confrontation to the largest degree in British Columbia. And as a man reasonably in the middle, let's hope that, one, the negotiations with the BCGEU and the government go cleanly, that they manage at least to delay and get their terms of layoff, or something like their terms of layoff, for the deadline of October the 31st. And let's hope there's enough room to move so that perhaps the fears of all the public sector unions can be eased as well. But don't let anybody tell you that a general strike is on as of now for the 1st of November throughout British Columbia. Heavy little piece that. I'm sorry Kramer's not here, but I understand the delicacies of the situation. On the other hand, I made my annual visit to the IWA convention yesterday, and what did I find but a capitalist-type, former extreme left-wing union leader by the name of, is he coming up now?
It's nice to see you become a mellow capitalist in your old age.
Well, that may be your interpretation, partner. You've never been a mellow capitalist. You're just a capitalist, and I have never been that.
Of course, there's the celebrated Syd Thompson, the loudest mouth in the labour movement for nigh on 30 years within my knowledge in British Columbia. On a more sophisticated note this morning, we're going to talk to a somewhat perhaps undiplomatic diplomat by the name of Charles Ritchie, who has written a continuation of his delightful diaries called Storm Signals. Now, Ritchie, Charles Ritchie, in case you've forgotten, was the guy who actually witnessed what happened between Lester Pearson and Big Johnson when the allegation was that Johnson had lifted Pearson up like a beagle and shaken him around. And then, I suppose for old time's sake, I've got David Pattison, who's the head bummer in the, of all things, the Scottish Tourist Board. I can never escape. But first we go duck hunting at the IWA. Old union leaders never die. They don't even fade away quietly. And one of the best-known old union leaders in British Columbia is Syd Thompson of 1217 of the IWA, who is allegedly in retirement. When I made my annual visit to the IWA convention yesterday, which is now a tradition as far as I'm concerned, even if it's not as far as they're concerned, I discovered that Mr. Thompson was there and in his private office. I caught him as he came out of his private suite in the Holiday Inn Harborside.
As I live and breathe, and I have living proof now, Syd Thompson, that you are a gentleman.
Webster, you're going bonkers to say a thing like that.
No, I am not. Syd Thompson, ladies and gentlemen, is one of my great old orangutan, noisy, extravagant acquaintances from the labor movement. And I want to ask what an old retired gent like you is doing at this here common IWA convention.
Well, I'm an old working man from a way back, Webster. The IWA is my union. And the way it goes, the way I go, and hopefully the way the province will go.
Well, the way the province is going right now, I don't have much hope for the IWA either.
Oh, don't you say that. It is Bennett and Company. Society that is in troubles, not the labor movement.
All right,
Free enterprise is in troubles. Don't you ever forget that.
Before we go to that, and I look at your svelte, trim figure for a 67-year-old.
Yes.
Retired now these past 2
And
years.
you're a year out, by the way, too.
68-year-old.
Yeah, that's right.
I understand you recently have been engaging in capitalistic endeavors which give you that beautiful sundown on your handsome visage.
You know, you have a knack, Webster, of twisting everything around. Just because the upper crust in England go bird hunting, that's no reason why we in North America can't, as working people, go bird hunting.
What do you mean
bet your
bird
life.
hunting? You mean duck hunting?
Duck hunting, yes. Duck
Not-
hunting, grouse hunting, and goose hunting.
Not bird hunting. That's something else again.
Oh, is it now?
Duck
I
hunting.
guess so in your language. I guess in the city here you people go bird hunting once in a while, eh?
Syd Thompson,
Yeah.
as a representative of the common working man, how in the name of all that's holy did you get involved in this capitalistic enjoyment of going shooting ducks on the prairies?
Yeah. Well, I want to tell you something, Webster. The good things in life are not only for the rich. I've always been a believer what is good for the rich should be good for the working people, eh? And good whiskey, good food, and good bird hunting is for working people.
All right, just tell me how
And
much.
we want more of it.
Let's answer some questions. Just answer some questions.
Yeah.
How much did that bird hunting, duck hunting trip cost you?
Well, what the hell has that got to do with you? I don't ask you what your expenses are.
You asked me.
I'm a pensioner. The IWA pension fund gives me good pension money, and I intend to spend every dollar of it. I've been told when I was a boy that St. Peter won't let people in the gate when they got money, so I intend to spend mine, Jack.
A shell for your fancy semi-automatic shotgun cost you 50 cents a piece.
Oh, you're a way out of time, man. You're a way out of time. In this inflationary period, you can't buy decent shotgun shells for less than $1 a piece.
Tell me, how many shotguns have you got?
Well, I got a great variety of
Who
them.
gave them to you?
Oh, working people organizations have given me guns and presents for the little bit of work that I did in my life.
Well, it's nice to see you become a mellow capitalist in your old age.
Well, that may be your interpretation, partner. You've never been a mellow capitalist. You're just a capitalist, and I have never been that.
You're talking to the first practical editor of the lumber worker.
Yes, I know that.
Who
I know
saved your skin.
Yeah,
in
and he didn't
19
stay there very long. He
And-
didn't stay there very long.
and-
He saw greener pastures, boy, real quick. Real
Now-
quick, huh?
saved your skin in 1947.
Oh, well, you helped a little bit. We'll give you credit for that. But man alive, when you saw greener pastures, you moved in an awful hurry.
Well, there's some truth in that, I'm the first to admit, but at the same time, we're trying to come down off your present perch and be a little more practical. You must confess that with friends like the PPWC, the IWA doesn't need any enemies, does it?
Well, we haven't got the PPWC as friends. They have never been our friends. You guys interpret it that way. The labor movement has its problems, and I'm the first to admit that. But I'll tell you, society needs the labor movement today more than ever before.
Which is more important to you, the people in the streets from Solidarity or the rather lethargic, leaderless NDP in Victoria?
Webster, you're asking leading questions.
All right.
And I refuse to get involved in those kind of arguments with the likes of you.
Do you think that...
You old liberal, you will never quit, you know, fighting for Trudeau and company, and I refuse to go that route.
Are you proud of the performance of the NDP with its lame duck leader? Answer the question.
Answer the question. I'm an NDPer, and I support the NDP lock, stock, and barrel.
But the Solidarity has taken over from
And
that.
I don't make any bones about it, unlike you, who equivocate and waffle and flounder around where the hell you belong.
Why has Solidarity taken over from the NDP in the present crisis?
Because the labor movement has that role to play, and it must play that role, and is playing that role. And I am proud of the labor movement in this province, very proud of it.
I look into the camera and give a personal message which I can use on the air to the leader of our parliament, which is adjourned at the moment because it causes trouble, a fellow by the name of William Bennett.
I would say to Bill Bennett, and I have had the opportunity to meet him on numerous occasions, that for heaven's sake, back down a bit, eh? And we don't need war in this province, and we don't have to have war. And the government has to bend a bit. The labor movement doesn't want war and is prepared to compromise and make agreements, but it can't be all one way, and Bennett and the Socrats have to understand that.
Thank you, Syd. Off duck shooting again tomorrow?
No. The duck shooting is over for another year, Webster, and I'm going to eat the ducks now, huh?
Thank you very much.
Okay, fine now.
Walk off stage. That is Syd Thompson, the likes of which there will never be another in the labor movement in British Columbia. I have in my hand a piece of paper which may be the sentence of death for what was once the largest plywood mill in the world, the Vancouver Plywood Division of MacMillan and Bloedel. And on October the 21st, 1983, the employees were regretfully advised that they would be laid off at the end of the afternoon shift on Saturday, December 17, 1983. The minimum layoff will be until Saturday, March 24th, 1984, and it says here, the future operating feasibility of the Vancouver Plywood Division will be carefully reviewed and a further announcement as to its future when the assessment is completed. I've got Doug Evans, who is 1217 local of the IWA. Now, I'm not wrong in saying that the Vancouver Plywood Division was the biggest in the world in the 60s.
In 1964, they opened up what they call B-Mill. B-Mill was a brand new plywood plant. It supplemented A-Mill, and at that time, 1,100 people worked in that plant.
Well, now...
It varied between 1,100 and 1,200 people up to and including the 70s. And at that time in 64, when they opened it, they had a banner there that it was the largest plywood plant in the world.
Was there not a move made to close it sometime before this crisis?
Yes, in 1978, they made a move to completely close that plant and lay off approximately 800 employees.
Listen, maybe my memory's wrong, but didn't a fella called Bennett step in and exert some pressure on Mac and Blow at the time?
Bill Bennett said he would not accept a shutdown at that time, and he advised the parties to get together and meet and come up with a formula rather than shutting down the plant completely. We came up with a formula. We agreed to shut down a mill completely and have preferential hiring exerted on the industry, and we was enabled to save between 350 and 400 jobs, and the people who was laid off at that mill either took early retirement with supplemented pensions, or they moved on preferential hiring into other mills in the industry.
But that was early, generous retirement with the payment still being made by the company until the men reach 65.
Right. Anybody over 60.
Now, as of now, 350 laid off. Do you think, and I don't want to be professionally pessimistic, do you think Vancouver plywood mills, according to what the discussions you've had, will ever open again?
I am hopeful it'll open. It's a good mill.
Is it a modern mill?
It was built in 1964.
Well, what about
It's only 19 years old.
You must have asked the company across the table if they're going to put any improvements into it to make it more competitive.
We've had a number of meetings with the company, and we have told that company if they put between $1 and $2 million into that plant, it would be a good plywood plant, and it could manufacture and compete with any plywood plant on the coast.
But that's their decision, not yours.
That's their decision.
Hopefully it's going to reopen, but highly unlikely in your private opinion.
Well, they have refused to put 1 cent into that plant, and they put very little in since 1978.
Now, I want to talk to John Nielsen. Hello, John. You've worked for 27 years at the Vancouver Plywood Division.
Right, yeah.
And what's your seniority in terms of years?
27 years.
Yeah, and 22 years for your pension, or is it 27 years?
27 years from my pension.
27 years for your pension. Now, how old are you, John?
59.
Now, what do you feel about the closure of Vancouver Plywood? What does it do to you?
Well, it simply what it does to me, there's not very many people that want to hire people at 59, especially in my business.
59. Well, maybe you could go back and work on a green chain somewhere with your seniority.
Where?
No, I'm only joking. I'm only being ironic about it.
No.
So therefore, if it doesn't reopen,
No.
you've finished.
That's true. Yeah.
In the lumber industry, you've
That's
finished.
true. I'm true. Yeah.
Has it been a good place to work over these years?
It was. What you really have to look at, that years ago, people, they put their life into that mill and worked hard, and like Doc, he said, then when we had that thing happen 5 years ago, they're going to shut it down. The thing the owners have put on the worker to work a little hard, we might save that mill. And the worker worked hard.
Have Mac and Blow had their pound of flesh out of you?
Well, I worked for 27 years.
And
I
a
worked
good-
hard for 27 years.
Now, what do you get now? If it doesn't reopen, which is a commonly held belief, what kind of pension will you get after 27 years in the lumber industry?
Not very much, because I'm 59, and you can't get pension because you're 60. Before you're 60, and I haven't really looked out how much it is, but it certainly is a thing you can live on.
In other words, you'll get your pension at 60, you'll draw unemployment insurance till you're 60, and it's highly unlikely you'll ever get a job again in the lumber industry.
That's correct.
Doug, his pension would be around what, $400 a month?
27 years times 15. Around a little over $400 a month.
27 years times 15.
Right.
Well, Tom,
But then it would be reduced if he took early pension at 1960. Or
You-
at 60 years of age.
it would be reduced from that.
Yes.
You can't blame Mac and Blow basically for the world's plywood position, can you?
Well, yes, I can blame Mac and Blow,
Why?
because they spend no money in that plant. You can't expect to run a car in 1978 till 1983 and expect it to continue to run. It's the same as a plywood plant. You have to spend money and you have to update equipment.
Okay.
Now, we told that company in 1978 to shut down a mill and to tear that mill down and get rid of it. It's obsolete. And they agreed that they would shut down a mill.
And
but
they did.
no, they left it sit there. And they left the 10-foot press there, the 10-foot lathe there, and they run it off and on. And they left B Mill, which is a good mill, built in 1964, 19 years old, and they put no money into it whatsoever.
Back to the personal side, though. Can you tell me, Jim, what's the average... John Nielsen, you're originally from Denmark.
True.
You're a big Dane.
Yes.
Right. What's the average age of the guys who have been laid off in Vancouver Plywood?
53 years.
53.
This is it. This is a mill of old people. Where do people go when they're 53?
53 is the
That's the average
age.
age. Yeah.
Story told.
It's not often I'm embarrassed in public, but I was kind of embarrassed yesterday at the IWA convention when I went back down to the convention floor, because as a reporter you're supposed to be watching the story, not be part of the story. But yesterday when we got down, Monroe called Thompson and me forward, and here in fact is an edited version of what happened on the floor of the IWA convention yesterday afternoon.
Don't be shy, Syd.
Be impossible with you around, Webster, to be shy. You'd never survive.
Certainly, Syd is a professional duck murderer, and as one of the friendly haggis-eaters, I'd like to introduce to the convention our good friend Jack Webster.
To have come here and to have received the fine reception that I did, and at the same time to run into Jack Webster is a double honor. And Webster is Webster, you have to understand that. But he, in his own way, whether he knows it or not, has helped me over the years. And he would be the first to deny that. When he had that little office there in the Georgia Hotel, him and I used to get on that radio program of his, and I'll tell you, it was a miracle that the walls didn't collapse, because it was a contest who could bellow the loudest, and I am not convinced that I can out-bellow Webster, but I made a good attempt at it, and that's the way we used to go at it over the years. I've known Jack for years, and he has played a role in this province that is second to none. Whether it is for better or worse, that remains to be seen, but a role nevertheless. Damn it all, to have come here today and to have had this double honor, it's a real pleasure for me, Jack. And now that you've allowed me to speak, as far as I'm concerned, you can carry on with your convention.
Don't go away, Jack. I will give you the opportunity to rebut, Jack.
Oh my God.
I thus we're off the record here. I shall be expelled from my secret membership in the Social Credit Party.
And if you believe that, you will believe anything. I've always been sympathetic towards the IWA, largely because
Most of your regional leaders have been reasonably good. But I want to say one thing about Monroe. I have only once broken a confidence he told me, and that was purely by accident. But to be at an IWA convention is a kind of tradition for me, and I merely want to say that... what do I want to say? That I can get Monroe into the studio, but on every occasion I've got to tell Monroe, remember, Monroe, this is a family program. In the name of all that's holy, please try and keep your language reasonably clean. And I think I have achieved that on 1 out of 25 broadcasts. But I go back a long way with the IWA to the BC lumber worker in the early days of the 40s and the 50s when Bill Mahoney was around. And other than that, I'm not going to commit myself any way, shape, or form, except that your moderate leadership, watch your back, Jack, has been certainly a breath of fresh air in today's abominably unhealthy crisis in British Columbia. And where are you, Jimmy Sloan? When I want to get you into the studio, all I can do is get you the end of a telephone. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
The reference to Jimmy Sloan was obvious. Jimmy Sloan is the guy who runs the PPWC. And I picked up a little bit of chit-chat from one of the IWA delegates yesterday to show you how annoyed the individual members are. When Sloan's people did the secondary picketing at Castlegar, they stopped the IWA members from picking up $30,000 in statutory holiday pay. To collect the stat holiday pay, you've got to work both on the Friday and the Tuesday and be paid for the Monday. And the picketing by Jimmy Sloan's boys, the secondary picketing at Castlegar, took away from the IWA $30,000 in statutory holiday pay in that particular area. That's the lighter side of the labor movement. Where the crisis will go today, I do not know. Mike Kramer, who gave the firm or seemingly solid plans of the public sector unions, at least, if Bennett doesn't back down, and if they don't get exemptions under Bill 3 from the arbitrary firings, which can be done in that act. In other words, if there is not an overall agreement on the exemptions, the terminations, recall, and layoff, he seemed to say out November the 1st. The meeting this morning between the IWA and Kramer and whoever else, Art Kuby, I tried to get Kuby on this morning, but I couldn't convince him to come, will develop as the week goes on. Next, however, we'll drop the depressing labor scene and political scene of British Columbia and turn to a man of considerable charm by the name of Charles Ritchie, sometime ambassador to Washington, D.C., and sometime High Commissioner to London for Canada. After the break.
Must look a beauty by now.
Thank God I never went to CBC.
Yes. Why?
I used to do a lot of work for them, on
Yes.
this hour of 7 days.
Yes. Oh, yes.
No freedom.
No, I suppose not, but you seem to have a very freewheeling freedom here. You can do anything you like.
30 seconds.
But they know I'm basically safe.
I strongly suspect that the habit of keeping personal diaries is one which is very much on the wane. And with me now is Charles Ritchie, who, as you know, was the ambassador to Washington in the days of both Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson, and who was the High Commissioner to London. And it's a delightful, sophisticated book, I must say, Mr. Ritchie, but I gather you're going to be diplomatic with me this morning.
No, I don't. I've forgotten how to be diplomatic.
Jolly good show. In that case, give me your opinion on the American invasion of Grenada.
I refuse to answer the question because I have absolutely no information about it. That's a diplomatic reply.
That, of course, is a training all your life. Did you not? You had to reflect the policy of your master in Ottawa on each and every occasion.
Yes, you do have to reflect it. You can influence a little bit if you're in Ottawa. At home, whereas Mr. Churchill used to say, power is at the centre.
Right.
But once you're abroad and they get you on the telephone, you have to toe the line.
Right now. Well, let me ask you a broad question which does not contain any confidences. When you see the Americans act as they have done in Grenada or anywhere else in Central America, and when you see the way the Russians acted in Czechoslovakia, in Hungary, or Afghanistan, is it cynical to say to oneself that in the final analysis the world is divided into spheres of influence, and if the enemy dares to cross that line, that's it?
Well, there are certainly spheres of influence, but I'd much rather be in the American sphere of influence than in the satellite Soviet sphere of influence. I mean, in that sense, I think there is a basic difference.
But is there not a great deal of hypocrisy in that, for instance, in the Cuban crisis, or in the Grenada, the Americans have decided that is a pressing danger to their security on this side of the Atlantic, so regardless of all the double talk, they would act?
There's a lot of rhetoric, and I think in order for the rhetoric to succeed, you have to believe in it. And I have no doubt that the President of the United States believes in what he is saying about the threat to democracy in Grenada. But that is a different matter.
But whereas if you were looking at a statement by the Soviet Union, you would not suggest, would you, that Andropov believes his rhetoric?
It's hard to know what Andropov would believe.
Let me turn to a matter in which I got involved before. The famous case of Lyndon Johnson and Pearson, in which you were first quoted, but it was corrected by you and in this book, that Johnson, at the time of his incredible annoyance at Pearson's pausing the bomb pause in Vietnam, there was a scene between the two of them of which you were a partial witness.
Yes, there certainly was. The President was infuriated by the fact that Mike Pearson came down to the United States and made a speech criticizing American policy in Vietnam. He kept on saying, it's coming down into my backyard. And we went to Camp David, the Prime Minister and I, for this interview with the president, and it got very rough. Of course, Johnson was a great big man, and he was a very rough customer. And he was, at one point, I thought, I didn't know what was going to happen. They were standing together just outside the French windows on the terrace, and the president had grabbed hold of the prime minister, the lapel of his coat, and his arms were swaying in the air, and he was denouncing, declaiming, and proselytizing in such a fashion. I found it very offensive.
But in that same occasion, he did not, in fact, do the beagle trick on him, as was alleged by Martin in Lawrence Martin's book.
Well, no, because, you know, Pearson was no butterfly. I mean, he was a football player and a baseball player, and I think it was no possibility of his picking him up by the scruff of the neck.
That would have been, as you say in the book, quite intolerable.
That really would have been the payoff.
But did you not also say that Johnson's behavior that day was intolerable?
Yes, I found it. But, you know, it's a curious thing. The Prime Minister seemed less upset by it than I am, but I suppose we diplomats are a tame species and don't really know the rules of the rough game.
When that scene was over, did Johnson and Pearson part with reasonable amity?
Reasonable amity is just about right. Mm-hmm. But the relationship survived, a little bit bruised, but it survived.
Now, there was another occasion in your book when Diefenbaker had... Oh, no. When you went to see Kennedy, presenting your papers, I suppose, to Kennedy as the president. How was your reception?
Cool, too, for different reasons, because this was the great row, as you remember, over whether we should have nuclear weapons on our soil or not, of which there are echoes still in a different context. But at any rate, I went down to see President Kennedy as Diefenbaker's appointee at a very cool point in the relationship. And the president was rocking to and fro in his chair in the White House, and he sort of allowed very long pauses in the conversation, sort of on purpose to show that this is not a cozy chat by any means. And the pauses got longer and longer, and then to my horror, he went, shoo! And I sort of froze. I thought, well, am I going to go down? Is my footstep on the sands of time going to be that I've been shooed out of the White House, the first ambassador ever? But it wasn't so, because behind me was the little girl, as she then was, Carolyn, coming in with her pet pony through the French windows, behind me. And that's what he was aiming at. But it gives you an idea of what a cheerful interview it was, that I should have had such a notion.
I can ask you now, of course, your favorite prime minister was whom?
Well, the one I knew best was Mike Pearson. But I served under 5 prime ministers, quite what you might call a mixed bunch. Mm-hmm. And I started under somebody rather forgotten now, who was the Right Honourable Richard Bedford Bennett.
R.B. Bennett.
And R.B. Bennett, you know, was a very able man, but the Depression ran over him, so to speak. He was rather a forgotten figure.
Louis Saint Laurent?
Louis Saint Laurent, I saw a lot. In fact, I went around the world with Mr. Saint Laurent, and he never once lost his temper or behaved like a prima donna during the whole time, which is saying a lot for a visiting prime minister.
For history students, Mackenzie King, a man whom I was gone before I came to this country.
Well, he's sort of entered into legend in a way. I had a visit from Mr. Mackenzie King not long ago. I was reading his diaries to my wife. We were sitting up in bed, and I made some rather impertinent observation about the content of the diary, and, you know, the entire bed collapsed under us. And I knew where this came from.
It was Mackenzie King's spirit.
It had to be, yes.
Now another one. You make some very pertinent observations about the current Prime Minister of this country. Mm. And you say, give me your assessment of him. You give him quite a brilliant description of his character. What do you think of Trudeau?
Of course, this assessment, this attempt to understand Trudeau, was when he first came into power in 1962. Don't understand him really any better now than I did then. The performance has gone on he's a great performer, but I think that the performance has gone on long enough.
More with Charles Ritchie, a high-level diplomat, retired, the diarist, Canada's diplomatic diarist after the break. On December the 4th, 1969, and this is the fascination of this book, it is a daily diary.
It is indeed, an hourly sometimes.
And you went back over and edited out all the irrelevant material, I presume.
Well, I don't know if I've edited it all out, but I've had no libel suits.
No, but the point being, though, that you kept a diary every day of your working life.
No, not every day, and certainly not every night. I'd sometimes leave it for a couple of days or 3 days if I was very busy, and then write it up, but never much longer than that, and I haven't tampered with it.
So these are contemporary judgments?
They are,
Okay,
yes.
December the 4th, 1969, this is your life, Charles Ritchie. I was thinking about my October visit to Ottawa. Trudeau's capital and court ruled by a nicey enigma. He seems to have cowed the Parliament, civil service, and the cabinet colleagues with a mixture of chilly scorn and scorching impatience, all overlaid with a quick, disarming smile. Pretty astute when you'd known him for such a short period of time.
It's the way it struck me, and it still strikes me very much like that, but of course I don't think that that Parliament is so cowed now as it was then.
But in '69, yes. In the days of charisma, it was.
Yes.
Is he an intellectual? Because you raise that subject in your diary. For the same day, as a matter of fact, you say an intellectual, yes, but is he?
I think, of course, he's a brilliantly intelligent man, but that's another thing. But in my commerce with him, I've never heard him show much interest in sort of general ideas or literature or anything outside the confines of politics.
A social swinger, yes, but not at ease socially, you say.
Well, he can be, I suppose, when it's an act, partly an act. I mean, I'm sure that if it's all set up and if there's a beautiful actress or somebody like that, he's probably in his element. But if you asked him to dinner with a group of people, just to talk, I think you would find that he was by no means an enlivening companion, far from it.
And as a matter of fact, were you not in London at the time that Mr. Trudeau captivated with his pranks the British press?
Yeah, when he first came in, all that great show, you know, about the sliding down the banisters and all the games, it was very successful.
At the same time, you must have been quite uneasy, though, because of the distinct change in policy in relation, for instance, to NATO between Pearson. Or was there a distinct change of policy between Pearson and Trudeau on the Western Alliance?
No, there was nothing distinct about it. It was very indistinct. Just at first, it looked as if the Prime Minister was very cold towards NATO, perhaps even wanted to partially pull out of it, was flirting with the sort of Swedish neutrality ideas and this sort of thing. But from the very beginning, I wondered how serious this was, and of course it turned out that it was not serious.
And were you not concerned at one time that he wanted to wipe out the whole of external affairs?
Well, he didn't wipe it out, but it's married now to trade and commerce, or I would say shacked up with trade and commerce. And it's not the same, although it's got very fine people in it, it's a very good service, but it's a very different animal from the one that I knew.
Well, perhaps it's grown too much, like Topsy. Perhaps we overdid our presence in so many foreign capitals.
There's a lot of harness for the amount of horse, certainly.
Yes. In Washington, that would be your toughest assignment. And I forgot to ask you your capsule comment on Diefenbaker.
On Diefenbaker? Well, when Diefenbaker was in power at that time, the government was falling to pieces, and it did fall to pieces. And he was not effective, certainly in his last year at all, as a Prime Minister. But the interesting thing is that he's very alive in the folk memory of Canadians, much more so than many Prime Ministers who made ostensibly a better job of it.
But there was a man in Diefenbaker's cabinet whom I didn't know if he was good at the job as external affairs, but whom you admired and who's still alive in Vancouver this very day.
I did indeed. And Howard Green was is, I'm glad to say, a very fine man who, in all political experience, was one of those who I most respected and liked. Also, he was a staunch fighter for disarmament, and devoted to the cause of peace and not thinking of his own immediate political advantage.
Which reminds me that your other key job was you were our, was it our representative at the UN?
Yes, that's right.
For disarmament particularly?
Well, there were endless resolutions on disarmament which achieved precisely nothing, but we worked hard at them.
Do you think there's any possibility at all of honest, non-rhetorical discourse between the major nations of the world in the United Nations which can achieve any practical move towards real disarmament and potential peace?
No, I don't think that the United Nations is the place where any progress will be made over disarmament.
Kind of hopeless.
Wherever else it is, it won't be there.
When you look at the world in 1983, what do you think?
Well, we've been living, you see, for 40 years in this uneasy peace, at least peace as far as we've been concerned most of the time. And I'm not so sure that this is a very much more catastrophic moment than other moments in the last 40 years, such as the missile crisis and other occasions. So I don't feel quite that we're trembling on the edge of the abyss.
Good. One more personal segment with Charles Ritchie, who and Johnson did not pick up, what's his name, Pearson by the back of the neck. He shook his lapel and waved the other hand in anger. After the break. Charles Ritchie has written a book called Storm Signals, right? The undiplomatic diaries of the aforesaid Ritchie between 1962 and 1971. But let's be a little more gossipy. Wonderful life. The perks must have been incredible. Tell me about the perks.
Yeah, the perks are not bad at all. Of course, you have to wait till you're an old man to get them. But you get a very nice... but the only trouble is, you see, you do get a beautiful house.
Right.
All ambassadors get very good houses. But... and you get servants, if you think that's a blessing now. But the truth is that this rather divides you from the life of the place where you are. And I think this is a difficulty for diplomats.
You're not suggesting to me that a diplomat should live in a walk-up apartment in a middle-class area of Washington, D.C.?
I don't think they can, for one reason, because of the security problem.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, for instance, I remember we were talking about President Johnson. I remember his coming to dinner with us in Washington when Pearson came there. And he had with him, I think, 30 security people who invaded the whole grounds and and had to have a separate meal cooked for them by the same cook who was cooking the dinner upstairs. And I remember saying to my wife, if these security people don't stop traipsing through my kitchen, but you know, you have to have a plant also to entertain the President of the United States. You can't do it in the coffee shoppy of the
But the biggest
hotel.
limousine in Washington you had?
Well, I must say they did me proud in the limousine business. The biggest one I had was in London, and now it's been being used as a hearse. It was sold to a funeral firm.
Sold to a funeral
Yes.
parlor. No, but I remember one delightful problem you had with a chauffeur in one of your postings who took to the bottle.
Yes, he did. I think this is the great difficulty.
Tell the
when you
story
take-
about the time he delivered you to the wrong place.
Well, he took me, he was coming back, he knew where we lived perfectly well, but he drove right through the gates into one of the American security military installations, bang through the doors, and we arrived, and I was just going to step out. I was snoozing in the back. I myself had been out to dinner. I wasn't drunk, but still I was relaxed.
You'd had a couple.
And then I found that I was penetrating into a security zone. But it was after that I thought our friendship would have to terminate.
And you managed to
Yes.
place him somewhere else in the best civil service tradition. Is that not correct?
Sounds likely.
Dinner parties on occasion where I gather an absolute pain in the neck.
The dinner parties were all right because you got very often very good food and drink. The things that got you down were the very large receptions, national days, you know, which the younger nations are particularly sensitive about attendance at their national day. It's a sort of sign that they've come of age. And if you don't go to their party, they're very hurt.
quoting from your diary. Met horrible literary female. Felt a shuddering repugnance for this malicious, round-heeled, blousy beau.
That must have been a bad day.
Well, there are many bad days.
Every now and then, yes.
Every now and then there were bad days. Well, Charles Ritchie, it's a delightful book, a delightful diary, and I hope you... Are you still writing them?
Every now and then I return, you know. It's like trying to give up smoking, which I do every now. I've done about 5 times in my life.
But you lost 4 years of your diaries.
Yes, I left them in a drawer somewhere in a hotel in a moment of absent-mindedness. Perhaps they'll crop up somewhere.
Now you're not even fully retired yet. You presently have a dignified position, which is enumerated at the end of the book, which is what?
Oh, the Privy Council in Ottawa. I've quit that.
Special advisor
Yes.
to the Privy Council in Ottawa. Quit it.
I've stopped special advising long ago, or things would not be in the state they are in Ottawa.
My thanks to Charles Ritchie and his book Storm Signals. I'm going to talk to a guy from the Scottish Tourist Board after the break. Dr. David Pattison is, what are you again?
Chief Executive, Scottish Tourist Board.
Chief Executive, Scottish Tourist Board. All right, what are you going to tell me? Why should anyone go to Scotland as a tourist when it does nothing but rain, the country's covered with midges, people that talk with funny accents, and the prices are horrified?
That sounds like Canada.
No, tell me. What do you do?
Well, we're here to promote holidays in Scotland to the Canadian population, and more particularly to the Canadian travel trade. It's a big market for us. There's a lot of Scottish connections.
Hasn't Scotland lost a lot of its charm in the past 25 years, 35 years since I left?
Well, maybe since you left, but it's picking up again. You come back now and again.
I only come back now and again, professionally, you might say. All right, why should I go to Scotland as a tourist, said he, not making it easy for you at all this morning, David.
Right. You should go to Scotland because it's a totally different type of holiday. It's different from anywhere else. We've got a wide range of holiday attractions, not only the heritage, which you don't really have back here.
What do you mean we don't have back here?
Oh, you don't have the depth of heritage we have back in Scotland.
That's a very, very, very tough remark.
Yeah, it's a tough country, this.
10 generation Canadians listening to this programme right now. But you're talking about the Scotch heritage.
Absolutely. It's the important one.
God, you are chauvinist, aren't you?
Absolutely.
You really are.
Yeah.
What's the word? Tough-necked people.
It's a tough-necked business.
But seriously, the only way to stay in Scotland is surely bed and breakfast.
It's a good way to stay in Scotland, yes. Bed and breakfast, meet the local people, travel around.
What's it cost?
It's about, what, $15 a night.
Per person?
Per person.
So that's $30 for
That's
two.
right.
The cheapest hotel's what?
Oh, you can get a cheap hotel maybe for about, what, $20 a night.
Are you a golfer?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk
1984 Open, St Andrews.
You play, oh, you, no, the
No, that's the 1984, the British
Open
Open
in
in St Andrews. Good reason for coming back.
On the old course?
On the old course.
Where do you play yourself?
Oh, we play around the Edinburgh area now.
Murrayfield?
Yes.
Muirfield?
Carstafton.
Carstafton?
No, Muirfield, no.
What's it? No, oh, that's too...
Yeah, that's a bit, yeah.
You can't get into Muirfield.
Difficult. Too many Americans on it.
If I came over to Scotland, could you get me into Muirfield?
Oh, I think we might get you into Muirfield if
To
you
play
come
a
over.
game?
To play a game.
Nay green fees.
We'll see about that.
What about, how much are the green fees in Scotland today?
Oh, they vary obviously according to the course, but remarkably cheap. You can have a good round of golf for maybe about between £5 and £10.
What's the finest golf course in Scotland, in your opinion?
In our opinion.
In your
In
opinion?
my opinion, Rosemount,
Where's that?
Blairgowrie,
In Perthshire.
Lairshire.
Ask me what I think is the finest golf
Right,
course.
what's the finest golf course?
Carnoustie,
Very good.
on the
Yes.
coast above
Yes.
St Andrews. And I don't like playing St Andrews because no matter how many times I play, I get lost.
That's right.
Is that a common complaint
That's a
at St
common
Andrews?
complaint. Yeah.
Tell me it costs £10 for a caddy in St Andrews nowadays.
I believe that.
Is that not exorbitant?
Well, not for playing St Andrews. That's your big highlight. You know, it's quite amazing that the ordinary golfer can play where all the big champions are.
That's right,
It's
it's only
quite unique for golf.
£3 to get on, is that
That's
right?
That's right.
And if you want to be real snotty, you can have, you probably dicker down a caddy to £5.
Oh, yes, aye. With your charm, certainly.
But no, I carry my own bags. I will not
Aye,
play.
that's your Scotch heritage
No,
again.
no. How many? There are 300. I think it used to be 3. You mean, say, the Scotch are mean?
Yes.
careful.
How many golf courses are in Scotland? I can give you the answer if you don't know.
Well, you tell me.
365.
No, there's 366. We built another one last year.
We used to play on all the public courses in Scotland.
Yeah, some of them the best.
They are the best.
Yeah.
No one would dare take away a golf course.
Absolutely not.
All right, now, I see great promotion in some of the magazines about skiing in Scotland. You don't get enough snow for skiing.
We do.
Where?
We do. In the Cairngorms.
The what?
The Cairngorms.
That's
in
the name?
Aviemore. That's the name of the mountains.
The name of the mountains,
Yeah.
Cairngorms.
Cairngorms.
I thought that was a semi-precious stone that you put
That's
in a
where
wee
you get
brooch
them
in
as
your
well.
lapel.
Yes, that's where you get them.
You get the Cairngorms in the Cairngorms. Aviemore,
Aviemore.
artificial snow.
No, real snow.
None. Don't you use
We
artificial?
don't use artificial snow.
In
No, it's the
Aviemore.
real thing.
There's not that much snow in Scotland.
No,
mind
it's
you.
not. It's not a big industry in Scotland.
All right, next question. I wrote an article about this in the Scottish Sunday Mail many years ago when my brother was editor of it. And I got so infuriated because I was up near Ullapool, and here was a little notice from some Highland laird, you know, the kind you dislike on sight, who wanted to charge 5 shillings for me to go and look at the salmon in his pool. Is that still common?
No, it's not terribly common. And you can go and look at salmon elsewhere and hydroelectric stations where they build fish ladders and so on.
That's better.
Yeah, much
but
better.
if I want to fish salmon in the river, I've got to buy my day's fishing. Is that correct?
It depends on what river you're on. Most of them you need a permit, certainly. But the cost of that permit will vary according to the quality of the fishing.
From £1 to £5?
Yeah,
For a day's fishing?
for a day's fishing.
Buying it from the landlord?
No, not necessarily. Sometimes you buy it from the local authority, from the town, who own the fishing waters. You can go fishing for salmon in the centre of Inverness.
Ah, that's better. Things are looking up.
Oh, yes.
Is it still a fact of law, though, that if you're caught with salmon scales in your boat off the mouth of a river, you're committing an offence?
You can be.
And
can be.
they can seize your boat.
That's right.
'Cause
But in the
salmon-
Highlands, you know, you only become really legitimate if you've been caught for poaching.
That's right. It's a good honour. I've got a
right.
very good friend, a distinguished Canadian businessman, who has been nicked for poaching many times, but at the end of the war he would always appear in uniform in court,
Right.
you know, after he'd been nicked for poaching, and the judge, the JP or whatever
I
it
felt
was,
sorry for him.
would dismiss him as a matter of course. I was listening to a record this morning by an Englishman who lives in a special part of Scotland by the name of, what's his name? Paul McCartney.
Yes,
And he was talking away about the Mull of Kintyre.
yes.
And when I came in this morning, somebody said to me, what is a mull? I had to look it up in the dictionary. What is it?
It's a big headland.
A headland or a
Yes,
cape?
out into a cape, that's right, you would call it a cape.
Well, it's out of the dictionary. Does McCartney own half of the Mull of Kintyre?
No, he only owns a small farmhouse just north of the Mull of Kintyre.
358 acres?
No, that's quite small in Scotland.
Why should I resent that? I've got no right to resent that whatsoever.
Maybe you resent his singing talent.
No, I don't know what it is. It's just a piece of inbred, I suppose, prejudice. Okay, have you anything special about tourist attractions you want to tell me about?
Well, next year's a bit special. There's a lot of heritage promotions going on throughout the whole of Britain, and Scotland's participating in that.
And
So we think it's worthwhile coming across next year.
they open in St Andrews
The opens in St Andrews next year,
in 1984.
1984. The Silver Brooms in Glasgow in 1985.
Is that the
curling,
big...
the World Curling
The World
Championships.
Curving... That's the one that Canada always wins.
No, well, sometimes wins.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I used to know the skipper of the Scottish team, Colonel McClellan, from the Black Isle.
yeah.
You're not a cuddler, are you?
No,
You're a golfer.
I'm a golfer.
Okay, David, how many of you are here?
There's 30 of us over. Yeah. It's quite good for the Canadian tourist industry, that as well.
Yeah, except you'll be on special rates as travel agents.
Yeah, Air Canada keep upgrading us. We get to fly inside the aircraft.
Very good indeed. How big an airport is Prestwick nowadays?
It's still quite big, yeah, and that's one of the main reasons for being here, is to promote the direct flights from Canada into Prestwick.
There are not that many of them.
No, it's the Air Canada flights from Toronto, and then there's direct flights from the States.
So it's mostly the charters that go
It's
into...
mostly charters. Yeah.
That go into... Not
Go straight
Glasgow
into
Airport.
Prestwick. No, it's
Prestwick
Prestwick's the
Airport.
transatlantic airport.
Well, David, I wish you the very best of luck. Give my regards to wee Michael Kelly.
Will do.
A Lord promised to Glasgow.
That's right.
I see he announced yesterday that there's going to be a... Glasgow is going to be a non-smoking city by the year 2000.
Well, could be.
They're the world's worst smokers, you know.
Yes.
And they've been known to take a dram or two now and again.
One or two of those, yes.
David Pattison, chairman of the Vice Chairman, Chief Executive Officer of the Scottish Tourist Board from Edinburgh.
From Edinburgh.
What does it say about Edinburgh?
Best thing about Edinburgh is the train to Glasgow.
There are other sayings as well, for instance, like, no, you can't use them on the air, because this is a family program. My thanks to David. Best of luck. Regards to your friends in the delegation. I'll see you in Scotland one day.
Look forward to that.
Back with a free-for-all for Webster after the break. Well, we've got a good chunk of time for a free-for-all on whatsoever you choose, but I want, first of all, to draw attention to a fairly serious matter. First of all, to fill you in, I had expected to have Mike Kramer of CUPE on this morning, but he's been called to a meeting with the IWA, and there seems to be some disagreement about the interpretation of the possible course of action of the BC Federation Strategy Strike Committee as it comes up to the imposed deadline, or the almost imposed deadline of October the 31st for satisfactory settlement, not only with the BC GEU, but with the public sector unions. So all very complex at the moment. But just the other day, in a 2-to-1 ruling, Ontario's highest court ruled unconstitutional the Ontario legislation of 1982, which limited the wages and salaries and bargaining rights of Ontario's civil servants. And as you know, in the legal system of this country, a precedent set by another high court in another province can, although not necessarily, can be used as a precedent for every other part of the nation of Canada. And as Marjorie Nichols says last night, to understate the case, the Ontario statute that has been held to be in violation of the Canadian Bill of Rights guarantee of freedom of association looks like a pro-labour treatise when contrasted with the array of social credit restraint legislation. There's no doubt about it, there's an incredible problem in the finances of the provinces of all of this nation. And probably the major province with the biggest problem is, of course, British Columbia, where the resource revenues have just gone down the tube. Down the tube because the market isn't there either for our mining products, raw though they may be, or for our forest industrial products. And the government's revenues depend to a large extent, at least $1 billion a year, on how much revenue comes to taxpayers from whatever's going on. So I think I'll go for a free-for-all this morning. You don't have to be heavy if you don't want to be. I don't particularly want to be heavy, but I'll tackle any of the labour topics that we've been battering at for some particular time and see if we can make any sense out of your views or my views or anybody's views. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I must say I've enjoyed your programme this week very much. Every day this week it's been really nice. Really good programme, get away from politics and things like that.
Funny, I can work hard all week and do a lot of serious, heavy, what I think are reasonably objective programs. And the only thing that anybody ever mentioned to me on the street this week was that riotous piece of nonsense with Don Cherry, the former coach of Denver Colorados and the Boston Bruins. So what people want, and you can't really blame them, is a laugh.
That's true, but it's nice to get some nice, good shows, you know. You don't need politics all the time, you know.
Here. I'd love to avoid them if I could every day of the week, but unfortunately I can't. Thanks for your call.
Okay.
Go ahead from Victoria.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
I'd like to talk to you about your telephone system.
My telephone system?
Yes. Two things. Can you not assign each caller the line he's on, and that way we know when we're talking to you, other than avoid all this confusion? And secondly, when we're on hold, we can't always hear what you're saying on the show.
Now that's a very important problem, which I shall investigate today, because if the line feed to your ear is not up to par, you don't know what the dickens has been happening.
That's right.
Okay, that I'll accept at once as a valued criticism, and we shall have it rechecked today by our own people and the BC Telephone Company. Secondly, I think you are correct. I am sometimes a little bit too arbitrary as we check the calls, and I've never gone to the system of assigning numbers, but we're supposed to be telling you, and I'm sure we are, that you're next up.
Yes, we are. We are doing that.
Well, that's the best I can do for that, but I think the most important point you raised, and it's a very valid criticism, it seems, that the line feed is too low. The problem is that not all telephone lines are of the same quality and strength.
That's correct.
But I'll attend to that, sir, and I'm grateful for your observations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See? Latin from listeners. Go ahead, please, from Vernon, BC.
Yeah, good morning, Jack. I'm the wife of an IWA member, and I wonder if I could touch on that for a minute.
Sure.
I just want to say to the ladies in Tassis, good show. It's about time we had more of a show of support for the right to work from the wives out there.
Are the women in Tassis still... Oh, there are no secondary pickets in Tassis now.
No, I know, but I think it's just a good thing that the wives stood up and had their say.
You're referring to the BCTV News Hour coverage of the women at Tassis telling the PPWC pickets to stay away until there was an official strike, if there was to be one, by the IWA.
You betcha, and that's going to show up more often around the province. You just wait and see.
Yeah, I know. I was kind of impressed by the women themselves when I saw them on the television. I think it was Sunday night, wasn't it?
Well, I'll tell you, I was thinking of that all on my own just the other day, before Tassis even showed up, that's what we need, for the wives to stand up and just say their piece.
Do you mean in any circumstances, or only if there's another union keeping your men out of work?
That's what I mean. Only when there's another union keeping my husband off a job.
And your husband's been working all through, has he?
Oh, thank God, yes. He went down to 3 days on a work-sharing program, which I must tell you I'm so pleased with the company about. I have to say they've just bent over backwards to keep my husband working as much as possible.
Which company is that?
Crown Forest.
Crown Forest? Good. Thanks for your call from Vernon, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please. Oh, no, just a minute. I took the wrong one, you see. It was my mistake. Go ahead, please.
Bruce Wally, Jack.
Hello, Bruce.
Yeah, I'm a professional engineer, and I've just come home from Sri Lanka, having lived there for 2 years on a Canadian-funded government project for irrigation works. And it was Canadian consultants, of which I was a member of the team, and we had a Canadian contractor, which was 75% French-Canadian and 25% English-Canadian on the project. And just for the record, we got a bigger, Mrs. Wally and I got a bigger cultural shock from the French Canadians than we did from the Sri Lankans. Of course, we'd been in the Philippines before. But the amazing thing was that quite until near the end of the job, a lot of the French Canadians wouldn't even speak English to us, even though they could speak English. And furthermore, most of the goods from the commissary must have come out of Montreal, because we'd get cases and cases of Campbell's soup written in French and no English.
That wouldn't affect the quality of Campbell's soup. Good.
No, but I just want to let you know, when the French Canadians say that there were some comments on your show about English Canadians are having just French thrown at them and not English. We ran into that, and I think we got a greater cultural shock from the French Canadians than we did from the Sri Lankans.
What was the project?
It was the Mahavali water irrigation. There was 3 countries involved, Britain, Germany, and Canada. 4, Sweden.
And did it work?
Oh, yes. I was the tunnel engineer. We drove a 6-kilometer tunnel, and then we had our dam engineers, and there was 10 of us, 10 engineers in the project, with a Canadian contractor, which was largely French-Canadian content.
But despite the language problems, you got your tunnel built and your irrigation system on the go.
Oh, yes. We were the first ones finished, and we came under budget.
Thank you, Bruce. Much obliged.
Okay.
Bye. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Premier Bennett is missing a bet. He has fired his legislature, and he should cut off their salary because they're not working.
It's only a recess.
It might be called a recess, but it could go on until next year. After all, they haven't been working all that long this year.
Well, they get an annual. What are you talking about? They get an annual salary.
Yeah, well, okay.
With expenses.
Barrett gets kicked out, and his salary was cut off.
Well, I don't think that has been finitely decided as of yet. It's a question of whether or not I do believe being in the precincts is being in the House. It's a decision which will have to be made by our dearly beloved Speaker, Walter Davidson. Yes, it will be. It's the rules of the House, and the Speaker is in command of the House, and they may be challenged or interpreted as far as I understand.
Yes.
But
I was just using the the term firing lightly, the way Bennett does it.
Yeah, he was fired lightly, I must say. Even though he is about 200 pounds, it wasn't that light to carry him out of the house.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye. Where did that get us? Go ahead, please.
Morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. Could you tell me if you're still using your runes?
My runes?
Yes.
Every morning I come in, I throw out my runes, and it predicts precisely what's going to happen to me every day.
What do you think of them? Have they been working for you?
Why, don't be daft.
Hey, come on. I'm being serious. They work for me.
They work for you?
Yes.
No, they don't work for me. It's like these stupid horoscopes.
They're not. It's not foolish. They're very good.
Get my
They're really
runes.
neat.
Where are
You
my
should try
runes?
'em.
Somebody, where are the runes? The runes are not here.
I hear somebody took them home because somebody was scared to use them.
I used them. Oh, yes, one of our crew. Oh, how do you know that?
Somebody told me.
Oh, are you friendly with somebody in my crew? My crew's
Not particularly.
My crew's not allowed to have any friends. No, you're right, though. One of them used the runes once, turned white, panicked, chickened out, threw away the runes. Another member has now taken them home, apparently, and I don't know what to do for her. Anyway, it's nonsense. You know that. Seattle, as I live and breathe. Good morning.
Morning, Jack. I always watch your show every time I get to, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about the PI. I called you last time, and you didn't bail out the PI, as I was trying to ask you to bail it out.
Bail out what?
Yeah, and like I said, I was hoping that you might bail out the paper, because I always watch Canadian television.
Oh, you mean bail out the PI?
Yeah.
Is it still limping along?
No, it merged.
Over the Times?
Yeah.
We know nothing of what goes on in Seattle.
Well, maybe so, but, you know, maybe you should try to bail out the paper because, like, in your city, the province went tabloid, and we didn't win tabloid. And
Listen, if we bought the PI, you might use the money to occupy Vancouver Island.
No, we won't occupy.
Or even Salt Spring Island.
No.
And I'm telling you, you wouldn't get much resistance there. No. Hey, nice of you to call. I haven't seen the PI in years.
Yeah, maybe you should. You know,
And tell me, do you watch me on the cable in Seattle?
yeah, that's the only way to watch you on.
Are you an American?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Hey, I saw your interview last season about your interview you did by yourself.
Oh, that was brilliant.
Yeah. When you gonna do a rock video of yourself?
A rock video.
Yeah, you know, I heard somebody did a rock video of themselves.
I was absolutely really upset this morning because when I saw my physical profile, I thought for a moment it was Al Davidson. Oh, I felt really badly about that. But anyway, thanks very much, Yank. Nice to talk to you.
Bye now.
Bye. Yeah. Careful what you say, Jack. Dangerous. And touchy ground. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
We've got Americans that work for us. You know, we do not discriminate against Americans.
Good morning, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning.
Yes.
I'm not at all associated with the woodworking industry or anything IWA, PPWC at all, but one thing I've noticed, though, and I'm seriously empathetic with the problem that they do have, and I don't have a tremendous amount of respect for Mr. Sloan, primarily because I think he's overstepping his boundaries, and I don't think he's got the right to step on other people's toes by unlawfully picketing other people's property.
Moved, seconded, and carried unanimously between thee and me.
I don't want to step on his toes by saying so, but I see he's regressed a lot on his initial opinion, and I'm glad to see that public opinion has swayed in their favor.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Oh, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Yeah, I was rather amused when you were talking about the Mac and Bloedel this morning. You said you can't blame them in regards to the Vancouver plywood closing. But I recall 3 short years ago, you know, when Big Julie wanted to get a small portion of Mac Bloedel and BC wasn't for sale. And so you know what's happened since then. Noranda's taken it over, Brascan's taken over Noranda, and I don't believe they have any sort of a social conscience at all. They couldn't care less about Vancouver plywood.
And Bill Bennett intervened in 1978.
That's right, yeah. And everybody said, bully for you, Mr. Premier. But
I'm glad you reminded me of that. Big Julie and Bennett, BC is not for sale.
That's right.
And then along comes Noranda, which owns half the world anyway.
Yeah.
Which is in turn owned by Brascan.
Which are the Bronfmans.
And the Bronfmans, and take over the lot.
That's right, yeah.
A good factual matter to bear in mind.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Yes, I wonder if it's possible you could get your your station manager there to put a screen in behind you when you're sitting there, and also it's the same thing on the news when Tony Parson brings the news. It's very disturbing to see the people moving around in behind you, and very distracting when you're talking on something, or if the camera's shooting straight at you, more or less.
No, well, I'm sorry if it annoys you, but I feel that to be in the newsroom is part of a vibrant, lively, ebullient, enthusiastic atmosphere, which at all time is bubbling with ideas and suggestions and
very
this
distracting
and that
to the
and
viewer,
the next
though.
thing.
It's very distracting to the viewer, though, who's watching.
Hey, look, there's that camera hog, Neil Adams, behind me right now, hands in pockets. Just got into the office, 25 after, hiding behind a plant.
Yeah, well, it's more or less a show of the whole station instead of the narrator that's speaking. And it's very distracting.
You have a jolly good point, and I shall make sure that Adams never, ever does that again.
Okay, thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
But
that's not fair. I'm sorry, Neil, old boy. Didn't even have his makeup on, and his scalp was shiny. Where am I going? Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Jack?
Yes?
I think this guy that just phoned you up was a little bit wrong there. I like seeing people in the back. Probably some of you female reporters with a little less clothes on, maybe.
Where's Debbie Vandergracht?
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Pamela Martin. I should really have a little chorus like, oh, no, that's just...
Your deal with Don Cherry the other day was just super. I thought it was great. I can't understand how so
Oh,
many people
give me
are
that
stopping you on
back
the street
again.
and
Come
saying
back.
that.
Come back to the back.
Anyways, over to some more serious business. Have you ever thought about having somebody starting your own Jack Webster fan club? And if you have you ever thought about making me probably the president of the Jack Webster fan club?
To admit that I need a fan club would be an expression of defeat. No, thank you, sir.
Martin has started
Enough,
a rock
enough.
video like our American friends.
Back after the break. We'll follow the Labour crisis tomorrow, but in the studio also will be Raina Titian, who's the justice critic for Mulroney's Boys, and Charlie Templeton, the ex-evangelist turned author and broadcaster. Tomorrow on Webster at 9 a.m. precisely. Tory Justice critic Raina Titian tomorrow on Webster at 9 a.m. precisely. Wrong one. The loudest mouth in Labour with Webster on check at midnight.